And now on Nights with Steve Price, the Courses and Careers Show with Danny Bielik. Thanks to Management Consultancy International. Go to mci.edu.au.
Well, Danny's in the studio with me, as he, of course, is each Wednesday night. Now, Danny, you've been a massive supporter of the federal government's higher education reforms.
Yes, I have, Steve.
A little bit of a lone voice sometimes, and there's been a lot of opposition from the Labor Party, from the crossbench senators, people who know nothing like Jackie Lambie are even having an opinion about it. Glenn Lazarus has probably never seen the inside of a university, I don't know. But you yourself believe that Christopher Pyne and the government are on the right track, but they've not been strong enough in selling their message. So your challenge was to get the Minister, Chris Pyne, on the program tonight and find out how this is going to be rebooted. And he's agreed to have a chat to us. Education Minister Pyne, thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure.
You do now have a 6-week winter break. The education debate has largely dropped off the radar. Are you working behind the scenes to reinvigorate this?
Well, I've deliberately let the higher education reform debate lie fallow for a while, Steve, because I wanted to give the crossbenchers in particular and the sector some time to pause and think about how they defeated what is a vital reform for universities, students and Australia. Let them think about what they did. Now, we'll come back in spring and we will reintroduce the bill and we'll have another go because it's too important to let it go. And I am obviously behind the scenes working tirelessly to explain to the crossbenchers why this reform is so important, to listen to what they want to tell me about the things that they wanted to vote against, why they voted against it. I'll continue to do that over the winter break. And when we return in spring, I hope and I believe that I will have listened enough to the crossbenchers to be able to get their support, because obviously Labor and the Greens are stuck in a time warp on this issue.
Minister, Danny Bielik here. It's interesting that you talk about this as a fundamental economic reform, which is exactly what it is, and this is exactly the right time when Australia needs this form of fundamental reform, when our methods of work are changing, when industries are changing, and as some old industries go away, brand new industries are coming up, and our ability to be able to take advantage of these great economic opportunities almost pivot on this fundamental reform. But here is a problem where not only have you been talking to the crossbenchers and I guess in historical terms been unable to convince them of the merits of this, but Steve and I every week on the Courses and Careers Show talk to mums and dads, talk to tradies, talk to students who are completing their HSC and wondering, what does all of this mean for me? Because they're drowned out in the discussion around $100,000 degrees and increases in debt and indexation. And to be honest, Minister, I don't think, as well as not being able to prosecute the argument in the Senate, I think that you've had some challenges prosecuting the message in the living rooms and the dining rooms of Middle Australia. What have you got to say to the mums and dads and the students who are listening tonight?
Well, what it means to students is that they will continue to get a high-quality education in institutions with a high reputation around the world. The future without these reforms is a slow decline into mediocrity, Australian universities and institutions falling behind. For mums and dads who have children who may not have done as well in Year 12 as they would like, they'll get the chance through the Pathways programs to reboot their futures and get to go to university, and places like University of Western Sydney, which have a very high preponderance of students who do Pathways programs and then undergraduate degrees, because we're going to free up that market as well. Of course, they can still borrow every single dollar from the Australian taxpayer for their education, and not one institution in Australia who've announced their fees have announced anything even approaching 50% of a $100,000 degree. So that's just a filthy scare campaign.
So why does Labor get away with that?
Well, they get away with it because, unlike you and Danny, the media are prepared to entertain this nonsense because it suits them to do so. They're not particularly pro-government,
Minister...
and they think it's part of the process of knocking down the government. And I think the resilience that I've shown by keeping on fighting means that a lot of people are saying, well, if the government thinks so much of these reforms, there's got to be something in them. And we have 40 out of 41 vice-chancellors who support them, because they know the disruptive technology of online universities is coming down the tunnel, and if they don't get the chance to be free to do the things they do best, they're going to be knocked over.
Minister, let's just go through some of these reforms one by one and have a chat about them, if you don't mind. First of all, you're talking about the ability for universities to be able to free up the market, as you say. So some of them will be able to raise prices, and this is where I think the media has cottoned onto this and gone, hey, $100,000 degrees. Minister, I think one of the fundamental parts of this reform that doesn't get any airtime at all is that some universities, and there are plenty of starving universities out in the bush, equally there are smaller higher education providers, they will be able to drop their prices to be able to give access to students who might find a challenge with some of the prices that you're talking about.
Well, let me give you two examples. University of Central Queensland, not a sandstone university. Their Vice-Chancellor, Scott Bowman, who you should get on your show, he says universities like his are licking their lips because they're lip-smackingly good universities, and he will use the new scholarships program of these reforms to attract students to his university, not by paying their tuition fees, because he knows they can borrow every dollar from the taxpayer at the lowest interest rate of any loan they'll ever get, but he'll offer scholarships that are accommodation, living expenses, and he thinks he'll be able to attract universities in competition with the sandstone unis. He'll be able to attract students, I should say, in competition to the sandstone unis on the basis of their quality of life, their cost of living, and the scholarships he can offer them. On the opposite side of the equation is Sydney University, which is a sandstone uni, and their Vice-Chancellor, Michael Spence, says he'll be able to increase his scholarships from $700 a year to $9,000 a year, and he'll be able to change his demographic breakdown from 6% low socioeconomic status to 20% low socioeconomic status. So this is a social justice reform and an economic reform. It's been lost in the cacophony of so-called $100,000 degrees because Labor and the Greens are not interested in the truth. They're just interested in winning elections and running scare campaigns. But the proof of the pudding, Danny and Steve, is in the eating, because enrolments this year at uni increased. So if the scare campaign was working, if it was true, then enrolments would not have increased. So young people know that the scare campaign is rubbish and they should still enrol in universities.
What I love about this, having two daughters, one in year 12, one in year 11, is that one of them might go to a sandstone university. Fine, great, no problem, that's good. The other one, who is not as academically gifted, I'd love her to go to the country and to go to a university in rural Australia. I think that's a fantastic social engineering idea to get these places out in country towns. And Danny goes on and on this program about the fact education's a big industry in this country, and we've got to realise it is an industry. You know, we're not bolting doors onto the side of Holdens anymore, but we can provide fantastic education.
Steve, I'm pleased that you've got daughters who are still at school, you're even younger than you look.
Thank you, Minister.
Which is good news. And you're absolutely right, of course. The capacity for, say, Federation University at Ballarat to compete with Melbourne and Monash will be massively enhanced by this reform, because at the moment, if you go to Federation University in Ballarat or in Gippsland, you pay exactly the same as you do if you go to, say, law school in Melbourne or Monash.
Which is silly.
Which is ridiculous. And under our reforms, Ballarat will be able to compete on price.
Yep.
So they'll be able to lower their price, and they'll be able to say, come to us, you'll get a very good degree. It might not have the reputation of Melbourne University, which is a top 50 university in the world, but Federation is certainly no slouch. But for the first time ever, they'll be able to compete on price, and the consumer will be able to make a choice about whether they want to do that.
So there are two parts of the reforms, Minister, that never get any oxygen. Universities will be able to and are willing to and are waiting to be able to drop their prices, because today the University of Sydney and Ballarat University must charge exactly the same fee. So that's for reform number one. Reform number two, you talked about the Commonwealth Scholarship Scheme, where universities will probably, by my calculation, put through more free students than Whitlam could ever have dreamed of. So here, this is the free university package, also never gets any oxygen. 80,000 more students per year by your calculations will be able to get a university education, also never gets any oxygen. One of the really big reforms, and then of course you've got what a lot of people don't realise, is that if people choose a private education institution, and there are plenty of outstanding ones out there, there is currently a federal tax of between 20 and 25% on their course fees, and you're going to remove that tax.
That's right. So these reforms not only allow every young person in Australia to access a sub-bachelor degree, which they might want to use to then do an undergraduate degree. It means everyone studying in a TAFE, doing a course, a higher education course in a TAFE, or a private provider will access the Commonwealth Grant Scheme for the first time ever. So fees will actually drop, and they'll be able to access the Higher Education Contribution Scheme, so they'll be able to borrow for their tuition fees, and the tax of 20 or 25% will be taken away. So in fact, there are hundreds of thousands of Australian students, young people and mature age Australians who are reskilling, particularly women, for example, who've gone out of the workforce to have maybe 2 or 3 babies. After 10 or 12 years of being out of the workforce, their skills are a bit rusty, and they think, actually, I don't want to go back to doing what I did before. Instead, I'm going to be reskilled. They'll be able to access the Commonwealth Grant Scheme, the scholarship scheme, get rid of the extra taxes that are paid on non-university tuition fees, and get the chance to reskill. So this is vitally important, because the Intergovernmental report said that one of the major things we need to do is retrain the workforce to be more productive. And that's why I'm so passionate about these reforms, and why I'm not going to walk away from them.
I know you were a student activist in your day, but you must be dismayed when you see that you get student protests against this, when in fact this reform will help them. You
know, Steve, I was a student politician.
Oh, I know.
At the University
Very
of
famous
Adelaide.
one in the University of Adelaide.
I was. And I have to say, they're not as good as they used to be.
No.
Now, I'll go to a university campus like La Trobe, for example, or QUT in Brisbane, and most students hardly turn up. They have 4, 10, 15 people turning up for these protests. One of them, I said to them, I feel like joining in the protest to thickening up your ranks. I said, where is everybody? The point is, they're out working and studying. They've got real lives and real jobs. Then you turn up to the G8 universities, and there's students there by the dozens, not that many, because basically they protest because it's part of the culture. The real test is, are they enrolling or are they not enrolling? Now, the enrolments have increased, and Labor and Kim Carr can't explain that if their scare campaign is working, why are students enrolling in record numbers? They're enrolling in record numbers because they know they're going to get a very significant private benefit. They'll earn 75% more over their lifetime than people who don't go to university, and that's why university will continue to attract students.
I think you need a good ad campaign. One final question from Danny.
Minister, you've basically said that you're going to work with universities to help them drop the prices. This is the package that will deliver lots of free university places. You're going to remove the tax on private education. I mean, there's so many unbelievable benefits. One of the things that really struck me that I think is the big opportunity that Australians are missing out on is, I went to Singapore recently and I walked around, and there's the University of Chicago, and there's Yale University, and there's all these universities that the Singapore government has managed to, through the right policy settings, attract into their country. So Singaporeans have an opportunity to go to some of the best universities in the world. Some of them are Singaporean universities who have had to lift their game, and some of them are foreign universities. And not only are Singaporeans gaining access to all this amazing amount of mind wealth from around the world, but international students, instead of coming to Australia, because they cannot get access to that education in Australia, instead of coming to Australia, they're going to Singapore, they're going to China. This reform, if I understand it correctly, will enable foreign universities and other higher education providers, the best in the world, will in fact encourage them to come and set up shop in Australia. Can you explain to mums and dads of Australia why that's good for their kids and why that's good for the economy?
Well, international education, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics only yesterday, is adding $17.6 billion a year to our economy. $17.6 billion. That's in retail, accommodation, tourism, and fees for university. The fees generated by the universities that add revenue to them, not from the government, from the international students. So the international students are actually subsidising and providing places for Australian students. Without that revenue, there'd be less Australians going to university. So the myth that international students are taking Australian places is complete rubbish. They are actually making sure that Australians can go.
They're helping build the buildings and fund the buildings, aren't they? I mean, all those beautiful new facilities.
At the University of Technology Sydney, for example, Dr. Charles Chak Wing provided the money for what they're calling the crushed brown paper bag building. He did it because his son went to UTS. He himself went to Monash University. These people are very committed to Australian education. We want to encourage that because we are in a world education system. Now, Australia is very attractive to international students. It's our fourth largest export after iron ore, coal and natural gas. It's vital to cities like mine in Adelaide, and it's completely transformed the city centre. And these reforms will give universities even more opportunity to partner with international partners and attract more international students, which grows our education system. And as you said right at the beginning, Danny, industries are changing. Adelaide, for example, has 3 great universities. We can replace the old non-sophisticated manufacturing base with these kinds of service industries if we get the settings right. Not if we keep thinking that government can keep providing when the taxpayer have already been squeezed as much as they can. And now can I just finish on one important point? In 1974, when Whitlam introduced so-called free education, which was just the poor subsidising the rich to go to uni, when he did that, 90% of students at Australian institutions were on a scholarship of some kind or other. 90%.
It's an extraordinary figure. You've been very generous with your time. As I said, I think you need a good advertising agency as well as a very firm arm with the crossbenchers. But thanks, Minister, for your time. Danny?
Thank you, Minister. No, look, we really appreciate this. As I said at the top of the show, this is the fundamental economic reform that Australia needs, and we'd love to see if, when you put this back towards Parliament, that you'd come back on our show again.
Well, I'd love to.
Good on you, Minister. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Courses and Career Show with Danny Bielik. Thanks to Management Consultancy International. Go to mci.edu.au.
Very kind of the Minister to give us so much time there, but you were quite right to highlight the fact that this is meaningful reform that needs to be actually fixed, and it needs to be fixed quickly. John's online. How are you, John?
G'day, mate. How you going, Steve?
Good, thanks.
Hang on 1 sec, mate. I've got...
Yep, go for it. Do whatever you need to do. Danny, I mean, I thought the Minister, a lot of politics in his answers, but...
Sorry, mate, I had you on the phone as well.
No, that's okay. Way you go.
Look, you guys need to be congratulated, and particularly Danny. That was just well done, mate, with respect to drawing out, using the Minister there to draw out and get that across. Look, mate, I've got a couple of degrees, and that's not just to say something, and being an engineer of background, but education has done the best thing by me, and I've pushed it through my kids, through anywhere that I talk to, as far as that's concerned, and I've always been pushing education.
So mate, why do the rest of the...
I just listened to that there. And he got that across. You sort of think, are you guys mad? These guys are just about shoveling it down your throat, and you don't want to take it. When I've finished my degree at the time when the bloke called Gough Whitlam came into power, I was under scholarship. I was bonded to the Department of Main Roads.
Yep.
Right? And I was grateful, absolutely grateful, because I come from working class background, that these guys did that. And to have all these resources available today, you can be mature age, you can be this, you can be that, to have free scholarships, free this. What is going on here?
So why don't the rest of the media get it? Why do the student body on the campuses all fall in line like sheep and protest when Pyne turns up, given that the reforms that they're trying to massage through the Parliament are actually going to help people get a higher education at universities out in rural Australia where they're going to have a fantastic time studying? I don't get it.
Look, the product is brilliant, especially getting it out. Look at Armidale. Look how Armidale's transformed in the last 30 years.
Yep.
As a village, as a town, as a university centre.
Well, I was just going to ask Danny, John, I mean, which of those rural campuses would you point people towards, particularly in New South Wales?
The University of New England is actually one of the oldest
The Armidale
universities
one,
in Australia, and it's been up in Armidale for over 100 years, and provides some unbelievable quality education. Equally, they also deliver education in the middle of Sydney, and that's not very well known. Same with Charles Sturt University. They've got campuses in Wagga and in Bathurst, and they also deliver some education in the middle of Sydney as well. Now, these are great institutions, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to compete and not have to charge exactly the same price.
But what this
as
shows,
University of New South
John,
Wales.
is that the government has a problem selling its message.
Look, they've definitely got a problem because, look, guys, I've done this for 40 years, right? So I've been through the system, right? Even when that acronym MBA it first came to Australia, I just finished an engineering degree and wanted to do that as well, but you had to have 6 years post-grad. So 1,000 guys in the room doing the exam because they'd been waiting so long for the MBA course to come to Australia. Now, that's just going back then. Look at it today. These institutions overseas can come here and you've got it at your fingertips, and people are saying, I don't want it.
Well, and this is exactly right, John, and in fact, they're discouraged because of the way that the laws are set up. They're discouraged from actually setting up shop here in Australia. So they can't build buildings, they can't employ Australians,
Stupid.
which is a travesty, but what they can do is that they can come into your lounge room over the internet, no problem at all.
Great call, John. Thank you, mate. Hello, Michael.
Hi there. I'm actually a uni student myself, and I thought, the first thing I was going to touch on quickly was they were talking about how they wanted to make universities such as Sydney more competitive, and I think that's a pretty good initiative because I think I'm an example of a student who's finishing in a semester, and I have the opportunity to undertake postgraduate studies, which I definitely will be doing.
Good.
But I won't be doing it in Australia because I don't think the universities it's not that they're not good. I just don't. I've received offers from overseas universities, and I would say I have no doubt that they're better.
That's a shame. That's such a shame, and that's such a shame for Australia because you should be able to study at that quality international institution here in Australia. But the laws that Christopher Pyne cannot pass are preventing you from being able to do that in Australia, and that's such a shame. So
yeah,
what
exactly.
is it that you're actually going overseas to study in postgraduate qualification?
I'm actually doing a second undergraduate degree. I'm doing a law degree at Oxford.
So. That's fantastic. And are you going to come back to Australia and use it?
Yeah, I plan to use it. I'm not really sure if I actually want to be a lawyer afterwards, but it's more just an interest of mine, and I know it's a lot more expensive, but in the end, I think it'll be worth it.
So someone with an intellect like you, why can't Pyne get this message across, and why can't the government sell to the community in general that this is a good thing?
I think it's Pyne has to bear some of the responsibility
I
for this
agree.
because I noticed he was giving a bit of excuses there. He was saying, it's the media's fault because they were simplifying the message. And it's right, people are simplifying the message, but you're the politician. They're not supposed to be simplifying it.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right, Michael.
And I think as soon as you let them simplify the message and they start talking about $100,000 degrees, you've lost the debate. I mean, I'm looking at the fees to study overseas, and I don't even get the benefit of government support, and they're not even $100,000. So,
and I asked him the simple question: why can't you get this through? And he blamed the Labor Party, and he blamed the Greens, and we put it in the simplest possible terms for him, and laid it out on a platter for him, and said it's about rural universities being able to lower fees. It's about all these sorts of things, and the message seemed to get lost that you need to communicate with prospective students. You need to communicate with mums and dads.
Well said, Michael. Good luck at Oxford. Hello, Ian.
G'day guys, how you doing?
Well, thanks.
Listen, I think part of the problem is about the professional uni students who like the city lifestyle, and they just like to have a debate because if you look around from time to time, and this has been raised before, you'll see the professional protesters turn up.
Yep.
And the thing is that look, I've done some postgraduate studies and things like that, and some of the attitudes of people who are studying, it's like they think that they're God's gift to society or something, that they automatically are entitled to something.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is this disjoint, is this disconnect between what's real and what's socially sustainable.
Well, that's a good point, Ian. I mean, I don't think we can generalise like that, but there would be a group of people, a core, that are out there doing this protesting that just don't want to know anything about it because it's a Conservative government's reform.
Can't get a job
If this
either.
was a Labor reform, they'd probably be marching down the street saying what how great it was.
Oh, there was still plenty of people marching on Labor reforms as well. At the end of the day, this is going to be the one that gets the free university
Good
degrees
stuff.
up.
We'll talk about it again as usual. We'll keep it on. Keep on the case because you're the only one doing it. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Steve.
10 to 10.